Okay, what's up, guys? I'm gonna go ahead and talk about something right now. There's some stuff that's going on with a situation within the comic book industry about a critic, actually two critics, that are getting more popular every day because they're pushing more content that's low quality. Even they admit to this, and I'm not, trying to, put down these people because they have been doing this for a while, and most of the comic books that they read, they openly criticize and make fun of and bash because, well, I do agree with them that some of the comic books are cringeworthy at times, that it's hard to tell a story. Now, I would say, I'm just going to go ahead and do this in a metaphorical way to make people understand the argument here about two sides of the argument about a critic and a reporter. For example, Spiderman and Jonah Jameson, or J. Jonah Jameson, as most people like to call him. You have to understand that Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man universe has always been the hardest critic about Spider-Man because he doesn't like him. He doesn't like who he is. He doesn't like who he represents. He just doesn't like superheroes in particular because they represent a danger, as in his past he lost his family to a masked marauder who killed his family. Now, you have to understand that in my metaphor about this whole situation, let's just say Bleeding Cool and whatchamacallit, Mary Sue and other publications that report about comic books talk about somebody in the media saying all these mean, terrible things because this person said mean, terrible things on the internet, and they take them literally seriously, calling it harassment. Now, the thing about those two critics in particular, Captain Cummings and Diversity in Comics, they will probably represent Spider-Man, because the fact that everyone likes an underdog, and the fact that Captain Cummings and Spider-Man and Diversity in Comics, are two people who like to openly criticize about Marvel comics, and they represent Spider-Man in a way. I'm sorry. The fact that they do kind of represent that way because you don't know who they are. They're behind a mask. They're behind their camera or recorder and recording stuff and talking about comic books. And people agree with them about these comic books being terrible stories. As much as they try to, point out those issues about and criticisms about the comic books that people create or represent or try to represent themselves as comic book writers and artists, I can understand that some of them are struggling to try to get an audience, that are trying to, promote themselves to the community as something that matters to them, which is their identity. Now, it's hard enough that some people may not realize this, but sometimes even the comic book artists and the writers are the Spider-Man, and they don't realize it because they've been trying their best, just like Spider-Man, just like anybody else, struggling to do the right thing, what they feel is right thing. But at times, they're not perfect, they're not the best, and at times, I'm just saying that they're also the Peter Parkers too. They're also the Spider-Man. But all they're trying to do is earn a living, even though they don't make much of a living trying to write a story. Hopefully that it would sell well so that they can get paid to make a living. Because it's not easy to write a story about a hero and try to sell it to the masses to see if people really like the story. Now you have to understand, it's not an easy business to get into. And the fact that you have a critic who is Jonah Jameson openly criticizing you about your views and your ideas and your point of view and all this other stuff, who is the worst critic. Because you have to realize Jonah Jameson has always criticized Spider-Man. Every time Spider-Man sneezes, he always has to criticize about it, no matter what. But you as Spider-Man, focus on what you have to do as a person and focus on what you have to deal with every day. Struggling and trying your best. And that's the point. Even if you don't like your critics. Heck, Spider-Man didn't like Jonah Jameson. Peter Parker didn't like Jonah Jameson. But he was thankful that Jonah Jameson paid him money to actually take pictures of Spider-Man. That was the point of this whole situation. And you have to understand that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same person. But he didn't really care what Jonah Jameson thought of him. He only cared about the fact that he was going to get paid. He was trying to get money so he could help his dear Aunt May out. That's what matters to him. He didn't give a shit about what Jonah Jameson thinks of him. He just wanted to help people. That's what Spider-Man does. And it seems that some people at Marvel seem to forget that point. Now, you can argue about your critics being the worst of them all the time, but you know what? At times, you as a person can save the day. You as the person can do what you want. And decide for yourself what is the right thing to do. What I can understand about Captain Cummings and Diversity in Comics, they want people to understand that they want to show that these writers maybe have attitude problems, they really hate their audience, and that's a reasonable criticism. And the fact that a lot of these so-called people that he calls SJWs, it wouldn't matter, because even if because the issue was quality of their work and trying to tell a story. And the fact that I don't really have an issue with both sides of the argument, one claiming that it's harassment, the other side is advocating for better quality of work in the comic book industry, which is fine. A better storyline is fine. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about something about a comic book called Miss America. The issue that I had with that comic book series was there wasn't a supervillain in there. There wasn't a supervillain that would challenge her, that would make her a hero. Because it seems that she had no way of challenging a villain. It seems that they probably need a creative villain out of thin air in order for that villain to pop up out of nowhere and possibly challenge her. And that's the biggest problem with America, was reading that comic book. There was no villains to challenge her. There was no super dimensional being that wanted to challenge her. I think there should be a story. If you want to attract readers, you have to find a really good villain. A really good villain to be her rival. That's the truth of the matter. And that's my criticism about American Chavez, because it seems that she has no equal when it comes to a supervillain that wants to challenge her. Like Spider-Man, Spider-Man had interesting villains. Electro, you name it. Any sort of villain that would have been fitting the bill to attract people to actually read the story. That's the thing about comic books, is that you need to find an interesting story. Like, for example, you had the greatest book of all time, Sherlock Holmes. It had a rival named Moriarty. Without a villain in there, you can't have a hero. And the problem with American Chavez, there was no villain for her to challenge. There was no real good villains that could actually make her look good. I can just imagine a storyline. Heck, I can make a storyline up and make American Chavez look better than ever, and basically introduce a new villain called Privilege. No, that's right, Privilege, not white privilege, Privilege. And you know what he's gonna represent? He's gonna be all white. He's a superdimensional being that just he's nothing. His skin is all white, but his face isn't even shown. It's just pure whiteness all over his body. He has no genitals either. He's Privilege, and he can speak. And he has no mouth either. He has no ears. He has nothing. He's just blank. I would actually introduce him to the Marvel Universe as a joke and call him Privilege. And his power is being outsmarting you. Because he's such a smartass. And that's the thing about being a... But he's going to be an anti-hero. That's the thing about him. He's an anti-hero who just wants to challenge you. And I would actually create that story if that would have happened to American Chavez, because let's face it, that whole comic book didn't make any sense at all reading it. And the fact that you need a really good story around a villain that could actually challenge her. And that was my criticism about these books right now, is that you don't have a villain that could challenge her. You don't have any villain to challenge her. You don't have any new villains to think about that could probably pop in your head and be like, okay, I need to put in a character that can attract people to have them read the story. Because every story that I read, it was practically boring from American Chavez. And that's me being Jonah Jameson right there. And if you don't like that criticism about it, oh well, I'm sorry. But I'm just pointing this out, that in a metaphorical way, me being Jonah Jameson, you being Peter Parker, you can improve yourself more. You can improve yourself more as Spider-Man, because no one knows who you are. No one really gives a shit who you are. Even Jonah Jameson doesn't give a shit who you are. He just keeps criticizing and criticizing. But the more you try, the more you do. Because Peter Parker was focused on one thing: getting paid and helping people at the same time. He didn't give a shit at what Jonah Jameson thought of him, because he knew what he thought of him. But he kept focusing on what he did the most, was helping people and doing his job and improving himself more and more. And it's just sad that people don't realize that at Marvel. Sure, you have your worst critics, but screw them. You don't always have to be the best comic book writer in the world. All you got to do is create a good story. And if you really want to make a good story on something that you really think that matters to you, then go right ahead. But you got to realize something. Will it sell? Will it inspire people? Will it make people become better people? Well, that depends. If it reaches out to a bigger audience. But at times, you know, you can't blame your audience for not reading your comic because, one, not everyone reads a comic book all the time. Most people are either reading it online or they don't care. That is the market right now. That is what it is. And sometimes people think that blaming them for being racist and misogynist and all these other accusations, all these other weird conspiracy theories about comic book fans is not going to help anything. It's not going to help you sell anything. And that's my criticism about this. Even if you don't like what I have to say, that's the truth. And if you're going to accuse everyone of, he's harassing me and criticizing me at the same time, no. I'm just pointing out that people are different. You may not like what I have to say to you, but that's my perspective of it. If you don't respect it, oh well. You're screwed over. That's your problem, not mine. And the fact that Captain Cummings and other critics on the comic book side of things, I can understand. You can, sure, they can criticize you harshly and make fun of you and all this other stuff, but they don't know who you are. You're the Peter Parker, you're the Spider-Man, and you're just trying the best you can. And the best is what you can do. Just remember that. If you don't act like Jonah Jameson attacking a critic, because you're becoming Jonah Jameson. Prove the critic wrong by doing what you have to do. Just like Spider-Man did, he did what he had to do. The right thing. Even though I noticed that Spider-Man had saved Jonah Jameson many times because he wanted to do one thing. The right thing, even if that person doesn't like him. He would rather save Jonah Jameson, even though Jonah Jameson may be a pain in the ass, but he saved him because, well, let's just say he would rather be paid by him than be hated by him. And that's the point of that's Peter Parker's mentality right there. And the fact that you need to focus on your job. Create a better storyline. Try your best to think of some ideas that could possibly help you understand to make a better story around something that you believe in. But the problem is trying to tell a story like this, trying to virtue signal something that trying to put representation and all this stuff. You just have to find a better way to make that story shine by practicing or something. But other than that, figure out what would be a good story to tell to people. I understand that there are young people out there that want to inspire people, that want to do something, but it's up to you to decide as either Spider-Man or Peter Parker or being Jonah Jameson, the critic. Just pretend you're Spider-Man. What would you do as a person? What would you do? Either save a person or say, fuck it, I don't care anymore. Because I understand that some people may not like what I have to say about certain things, but I'm just pointing this out. Those people who are attacking Captain Cummings and Diversity in Comics are the Jonah Jamesons. Same with Captain Cummings and Diversity in Comics. They are also a representation of Jonah Jameson. All of you have something in common. You're all Peter Parkers. You're all Spider-Mans. Whether you like it or not. No one's perfect. But great power comes with great responsibility. And that's all I'm saying. Anyways, guys, I gotta go. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry if I took this long to talk about this. That's all I gotta say. Thank you. Bye-bye.